In medieval Japan, there was a class of intelligence operatives called shinobi, who were trained not just in stealth and combat, but in emotional reading. They were taught to sit in a room and map the psychological state of every person in it, who was anxious, who was lying, who was performing confidence they didn't feel, who was one conversation away from switching allegiance. The skill wasn't mystical. It was trained perception. The ability to feel the temperature of a room and use that information strategically without being affected by it. The ones who absorbed the room's emotions washed out. The ones who could read without absorbing became the most effective intelligence assets in feudal Japan. You have the same instrument. You've had it your entire life. The difference between you and the shinobi isn't sensitivity. It's what happens after the signal arrives. For most empaths, the signal enters and becomes them. Someone else's anxiety settles into their chest. Someone else's sadness pulls their mood down a register. Someone else's anger puts them on alert, without a single word being spoken. The signal and the self merge, and by the time the conversation ends, the empath is carrying emotional weight that was never theirs. They walk away drained and call it the cost of caring. But caring and absorbing are not the same thing. Caring is perception. Absorbing is a boundary failure. And the distance between those two things is the entire distance between an empath who drowns and one who navigates. This distinction between perceiving and absorbing runs deeper than most psychology has been willing to go. Jung built his entire framework around it. The concept he called individuation is at its core about this exact problem, becoming a self that is distinct enough to hold its own center, while remaining open to everything around it. Not walled off, not shut down, distinct. The way a riverbank is distinct from the river. It touches the water constantly. It feels every current, but it doesn't dissolve. Most empaths never reach this because the world gave them exactly two options, and both are traps. Shut it down, build walls, become the person who doesn't let things get to them. Bury the perceptual system so deep it operates underground, leaking out as chronic fatigue and emotional numbness. Or stay open and get destroyed. Feel everything, absorb everything, call it a gift, and slowly lose the ability to identify which emotions belong to you and which ones walked in with someone else. Awakening is the third door that nobody shows you. Feel everything, absorb nothing, and use what you feel as navigational data so precise that the people around you can't figure out how you always seem to know what's actually happening. The mechanism is simpler than it sounds. There's a gap between perceiving an emotion and becoming that emotion. A fraction of a second where the signal is in your awareness but hasn't yet merged with your identity. For most empaths, that gap is so narrow it might as well not exist. Someone walks into the room radiating tension, and before the empath has processed the word tension, their body has already adopted it. The gap collapsed. The signal became the state. The awakened empath learns to hold that gap open, not through force or suppression, but through what Jung described as a conscious relationship with the unconscious. You feel the tension arrive. You recognize it as incoming, and you let it sit in your awareness without letting it sit in your body. The feeling becomes information instead of experience. The room is tense. You are not. This is where the empath becomes something most people aren't prepared for. A person who can feel every emotional current in a room and isn't moved by any of them isn't just resilient. They're unreadable. They're the only person at the table who isn't reacting to the atmosphere, which means they're the only person at the table who can actually see it clearly. Everyone else is inside the weather. The awakened empath is watching the weather from a structure that doesn't sway. And from that position, calm, perceptive, unmoved, they see things that no one else in the room can access. The lie that landed on everyone else's nervous system as truth. The guilt trip that steered the entire conversation without anyone noticing. The person performing loyalty, whose body was already rehearsing the exit. The awakened empath catches all of it, silently, without broadcasting that they see it. And that silence is the thing that makes them dangerous. Dangerous isn't the right word for what the world means by it. The awakened empath isn't dangerous because they use what they feel against people. They're dangerous because they can't be used. Manipulation requires a target that absorbs the emotional payload, guilt, obligation, fear, flattery, and responds to it automatically. The awakened empath feels the payload arrive, recognizes the intent behind it, and doesn't respond. The guilt doesn't land, the flattery doesn't distort, the fear doesn't steer, and the person on the other end, the one who has been navigating relationships through emotional leverage for years, suddenly encounters something they've never met before. A person who feels everything they're sending and isn't moved by it. That's not coldness. That's the most advanced form of warmth there is. A compassion clear enough to hold someone's pain without being dismantled by their strategy. The unawakened empath's shadow is the very thing that keeps them drowning. And here, Jung's concept of the shadow cuts deeper than anywhere else. The empath's shadow isn't cruelty or selfishness. Their shadow is the part of them that wants to say no, the part that wants to hold its ground, the part that recognizes a manipulation in real time and wants to name it instead of absorbing it. That part has been buried under years of conditioning that told the empath their value lies in accommodation, in softness, in the willingness to carry what others won't carry for themselves. Awakening, in Jung's framework, isn't about gaining something new. It's about integrating the part of yourself you've been hiding. The empath who integrates their shadow doesn't become less empathic. They become the version of empathic that the world wasn't ready for. The one who can feel your pain and still tell you no. The one who can sit with your suffering without volunteering to wear it. The one who loves you clearly instead of loves you at the cost of themselves. There's a reason the awakened empath is rare. The gap between perceiving and absorbing is the gap most people never learn to hold, because holding it requires something paradoxical. The willingness to feel everything while belonging only to yourself. Most people sacrifice one for the other. They close down to protect their center, or they open up and lose it. The awakened empath does neither. They stand in the doorway, exposed to every current in the room, rooted in a self that doesn't shift based on the weather outside. And from that position, they see the room the way it actually is. Not the way it's being performed, the way it actually is. And once you can see what's really happening, you can never unsee it. A person who can never unsee what's real is a person the world can never quite control again. The shinobi trained for years to develop what you were born with. The only difference is that someone taught them what to do with it. No one taught you. So you've spent your life treating a navigational instrument like a wound, protecting it, managing it, apologizing for it, wishing it would quiet down. It was never supposed to quiet down. It was supposed to be aimed,